Welcome to Connecting the Community podcast. I am your host, Marge Andre. I will be connecting you to people, organizations, and events that create community. I am creating this podcast in Richmond Hill, an eclectic and very culturally diverse community with lots of trees and streams and interesting people, just up the hill from Toronto. On this podcast, I'll be talking with Yvonne Kelly and Veronica Jouaneh about student nutrition programs, the organization they're both with, York Region Food for Learning, and we will be asking you to go out and get some smile cookies next week. Hi, Yvonne and Veronica.
Hi, Marge.
I'm very glad that both of you can join me. I have lots of questions, really trying to understand what this student nutrition food for learning is all about. So I want you guys to tell me who you really are. Yvonne, I think I've known you for well over a decade, but please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Marge. Thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Yvonne Kelly. I work full-time as a community partnership developer for York Region District School Board. I'm also work in the community on issues of affordable housing. In this role, I am co-chair of York Region Food for Learning, have been for a couple of years now, because I'm very committed to this issue of student nutrition in schools and just fairness so that everyone can have their best success in school and elsewhere. So that's why I'm involved in this.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Veronica, I have never met you, so please introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Marge. My name is Veronica Jouaneh. I am a community development coordinator out of Peterborough Child and Family Services, which is the lead agency for Student Nutrition Ontario Central East. And in my role, I support over 100 schools across York Region, primarily in the West, Vaughan and Richmond Hill, but I do have schools kind of in each area of the region. And I've been doing this now in this formal role for about 5 years and got into it because I'm also a mom of kids who attend school in York Region and was able to see sort of firsthand the importance that school nutrition programs play in the education of students across the region. And so kind of made it my life's work, so to speak. And as part of my role as well, I also sit on the York Region Food for Learning Committee with Yvonne and work on providing much needed support to all of our schools.
Okay, well, thank you very much for both of you. Very worthwhile work. So I thought something should be said about the importance of good nutrition for students. Can either of you say anything about this? Any new stats, any new research that's been done?
Not necessarily the newest research, but we definitely know that studies again and again have shown that healthy eating is positively associated with academic achievement among children. Getting the right nutrients and vitamins plays a key role in learning, memory, and attention span. So when kids don't eat or feel hungry or undernourished, it can affect their behavior and brain function. So this is all science. This is all stuff that we know. And so with all these benefits, it seems like it's just the simple and smart thing to do to make sure that kids are fed at school. And I think, just from my own opinion, I think that's probably why most developed nations in the world have a fully funded student food program in their schools. And in fact, unfortunately, Canada is the only G7 country without a nationally harmonized school food program. So we're kind of lagging behind the world's wealthiest nations in providing universal access to healthy meals and snacks at school.
Yeah, I don't think most of us here realize that. So thank you for saying that, Yvonne. So what is the York Region Food for Learning? And are there food for learning programs in other areas, like not just York Region? And what is the student nutrition program?
Okay. So interestingly enough, there are other committees or coalitions across the province where those have been built up by community and by student nutrition coordinators like Veronica. Actually, as part of the ministry funding that started probably 20 some years ago for student nutrition, one of the recommendations was that each area might have such a committee to kind of promote and provide support for advocacy and fundraise for these programs. So we aren't unique in that way, but we are an integral part of making sure that these programs are happening. We involve members of different school boards. So we have several in York Region. Not all are on the committee, but they certainly are welcome and invited to be part of that. We have public health, the coordinators from the student nutrition programs. York Region Food Network is there. Principals, school staff, and community members. So all are welcome to become members to help on a broader level support the advancement of these programs across all schools.
Okay, very good. There are breakfast programs and school snacks. How and what is provided to students? And are there parameters for what foods are served? And are there issues with cultural sensitivities?
Yeah, so in York Region, we primarily have schools that are offering, as you said, breakfast and snack programs. And the reason sort of behind that is that's the definitions given out by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, or MCCSS, which is the government organization that, or the ministry that provides the initial round of funding to all of the schools that we support in York Region. And the definition of a breakfast morning meal is that they're serving 3 food groups. So a fruit or a vegetable, and then 2 other of the food groups on Canada's food guide. So a grain product or a protein product. They're serving one of each of those to students. And then a school snack is going to be just 2 of those. The only criteria that the ministry requires, and thus we require, is that a fruit or a vegetable is one of those food groups no matter what. What exactly is served is left up to each individual school. And that's kind of the benefit of the way that we run our programs in York Region specifically, because we know that the needs of each school are different. The literal physical capacity at each school is different, and the volunteer support, because these programs rely heavily on volunteers for all the work that's done in them. Even when school staff are involved, they're doing it as a volunteer role in addition to their role at the school. So what they serve, it widely varies between, some apples and prepackaged Melba toast that kids can grab out of the office to a full plated breakfast meal. So there's really a lot of variety in how and what is served. And that allows each individual school as well to try to accommodate the cultural sensitivities. And so they have the flexibility to order in sort of more culturally appropriate foods where they can. The biggest challenge with that, of course, is often those foods require a little more prep work or a little more perhaps than the school has the time and ability to handle. And they often come at a higher cost. So what we do find is that programs where they are being incredibly culturally accommodating, they need additional support in order to make that happen.
Okay, no, thank you for elaborating that. Quite interesting there. So who runs the programs and delivers the food? You've mentioned lots of volunteers, but are there parent associations, community groups, and how is it decided if a school has a student nutrition program?
So that's a decision by each school. Ultimately, the principal must sign off or approve that decision, and the vast majority have been on board. But the programs themselves, as Veronica alluded to, school staff in their volunteer time coming in early to do breakfast or shopping on the weekend, parent volunteers with the help of student volunteers, anyone who wants to help, pretty much, as long as they have a vulnerable sector screening, if they're volunteers, can support and help with the program. There is no money for staffing, at least in our area. The provincial money doesn't allow or doesn't provide for that. It's really just money, a small amount of money towards the cost of food. So yeah, it's all school-based, it's all school decisions, and they figure out how they're going to kind of make it happen.
Okay, so it really is sort of patchwork for who gets it and who doesn't, correct?
Very much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not universal in the sense that everyone has one, everyone has, I mean, we have, like Veronica said, guidelines, but it is very much down to the individual school. So it's capacity. And from year to year, sometimes we've had schools where an administrator might say, I don't think we need this. But part of it is we want schools to continue with the funding, because if they do fall off or, stop the program, they'll come off the list for provincial funding and they might not get back on there ever. So that is an issue. So we really strongly encourage all schools, even if they have to cut back at some points like they are now, not to stop
Okay.
offering something, at least
Yeah.
a snack.
Okay. Uh, I have heard that the Richmond Hill United Church has been involved with a school program. Anyone speak about that? Like I hear certain things.
They are, yeah. So at present, the Richmond Hill United Church, we're super grateful for all the support and that they've offered. They are partnered with Walter Scott. And essentially, what the members of the church do is they will communicate with the school as to what the school is in need of in specifics. And then church members will shop for and prepare in the church kitchen lunches for students and deliver them to the schools and whatever else kind of they're indicated from the school. So it's been a really great partnership that way, because it really helps the school meet their needs without sort of overburdening the staff. And I know the students are super appreciative of it.
Okay. Oh, thank you for giving that example. So, what if there is a school in need and there's not someone ready to step up? What happens?
Um, it depends really on the situation. So in the case like Yvonne mentioned, where it's a school that has an existing program, and it happens all the time, where the person who had been coordinating either retires or moves to a different school or is simply for whatever reason not able to continue, and there isn't someone immediate to step up, we'll try to work with that program to sort of let them know how they can change the program to make it less intense, less of a time burden for someone to be able to take it on. In the case of a school that does not have one and there's no one to sort of step up and lead the charge, then unfortunately those students are left without a program entirely. And that's not something that we want to see. We'd like all the students across York Region to be supported.
Yeah, definitely. So, let's talk about funding, or maybe the lack of it.
Mhm.
I remember hearing, and I did go and Google it, that the federal government announced $1 billion for a national school program. What's the situation? And what is your source of funding?
So currently, the initial source of funding, as Yvonne and I mentioned previously, is through MCCSS, through the ministry. And what happens essentially is they provide what they consider seed funding. And it's intended to provide between 5 and 15% of the estimated program costs. The challenge with that is that core funding has not increased since, I believe, 2013. And so effectively what has happened is the number of meals we're serving in York Region specifically has more than doubled in the last 5 years. We were serving pre-pandemic about 6 million meals per year. And last year we were about 13.5 million across York Region. So what that's done is it's cut that core funding down to an average of 3 cents per meal being given to schools. So that the rest of that cost has to come from fundraising, from other sources, other grants. We are very much looking forward to news of the federal school food program. That $1 billion is, I believe, over 5 years. The federal government has indicated that they intend for that funding to begin flowing to programs in this school year. And the way that they're managing that is to form agreements with each province. Ontario has decided to work with the existing framework. So student nutrition, in our case, student nutrition Ontario Central East. And so we expect sometime, hopefully soon, to hear an announcement from both the federal and provincial government that they've come to an agreement. And at that point, we'll get to see what that funding picture will look like for us. And we're hopeful for good news soon.
Yeah, like I just think that, wow, you could actually be giving a lot more food to a lot more kids, and kids would be not hungry and doing well at school. So, okay, I am keeping my fingers crossed with that. So again, you've mentioned some figures. We mentioned the $1 billion, the cost of doing of you were funded for 3 cents a meal. It costs a lot more than that. Like, what sort of money is being spent on these programs?
So money being spent essentially is determined by what money is available to spend. For myself, I generally try to look more at what the province says it should cost. So, for example, they estimate about $2 for a breakfast meal. So you could have a school that is serving 500 breakfast per day, 5 days a week for the entire school year, which is 194 days. So, you know, based on the provincial calculations, we have programs that should cost tens of thousands or even up to like $100,000 a year. And what they're getting in terms of initial funding is a minimum of $500 per year to a maximum of 10,000, depending on the size of the program. A school that's getting 10,000 is typically a high school that's serving hundreds of meals using that definition of three food group items. So a cheese string, an apple, and a little packet of Melba toast is considered a meal. So essentially what happens then is schools are left to fundraise in whatever way they can to make that difference up. And what'll happen is if they have, a theoretical spend of $80,000, but they only have $8,000 to spend, then they do whatever they can with that $8,000. And that's sort of where York Region Food for Learning and our fundraising steps in, as well as we try to help close that gap a little bit for the schools where we can.
Wow. Woo, that's a big gap. Never really thought about what the costs are, and the idea of giving that meager amount to a teenager just seems like that's not going to work. So,
And just remember, those costs don't factor in any funding for staffing. So this is all entirely down to the goodwill and extra effort of people in the school. Not to mention the other caveat or the other challenge that I see is schools in areas competing with each other. Like literally going after the same dollar, the same store, the same funder, which doesn't necessarily set up a great scenario.
No, definitely. And so I'm hoping that just hearing this, people are, I need to donate, give a little bit of extra. So I'm going to be putting the podcast notes, the link to your website. There's a donate page, and any little bit I know would help if you're an organization, just like this ought to happen. And when it comes to getting we need to speak to our politicians to make sure things happen as well. But again, looking on your website, I saw that there's a need for fridges. And if someone's moving and the new owners don't want the fridge, I guess they can contact you and see if there's a school that needs a fridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of three community development coordinators, CDCs, who work in York Region. And myself and my colleagues, we each have a portfolio of schools. There's 270 that we support across York Region. And essentially each of us will keep sort of a running list of what equipment is needed in schools. So the best way if someone does have new or sort of gently used equipment that they are willing to donate would be to contact us at York Region Food for Learning. And then we can kind of work with you to determine where the best fit is going to be for that equipment, a school that needs it and is geographically appropriate.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And continuing the talk about food fundraising, let's talk about the Smile Cookie campaign at participating Tim Hortons happening November 18th to 24th. The York Region Food for Learning program gets half of the proceeds for this campaign. Are you guys going into some Tim Hortons and actually making cookies, decorating cookies?
So last year was the first year that we were the
Okay.
recipient, and
Okay.
that's for Richmond Hill and Vaughan schools. So Tim Hortons stores in those two municipalities chose York Region Food for Learning last year and again this year. And yes, we have done some of that. We also had a lot of students go in and decorate cookies and
Mhm.
hold signage and talk to patrons about the campaign and Food for Learning so that people understood. Yeah, and the cookies are about $1.50 plus tax. So we encourage people, if they're really interested in supporting, to buy in bulk, and they do have bulk order forms that can be picked up at the store, and then ordered and picked up the next day. Pick up your cookies the next day.
You
Okay.
can also access the bulk order form on our website. We do have a copy of it up there for
Okay.
any interested people.
Yeah, I liked that. So this is good excuse to buy a number of cookies, give them away, make people smile. They are smile cookies. So yeah, how much money did you raise last year?
It was just over $40,000 last year that we were able to receive from Tim Hortons, which is incredible, especially given that it was the first year of the campaign, and something that people were not necessarily as familiar with. So we're really looking forward to this year. And now that people are a little more familiar with it, we're
Mhm.
really hoping that it'll be even bigger.
Okay, yeah, very good. Okay, so people, let's go out and buy cookies. So, uh, yeah, that's and help this your very worthwhile cause. So, what are your goals and aspirations? If you were given the magic lamp that could grant you wishes, what would they be?
Well, I think first of all, fully funded programs across all schools,
Yeah.
because we know the benefits. We know that this is such a protective factor for students at risk, but also just in general, it's a good universal approach to leveling the playing field and helping all students do better in school. So even students that parents are working and leaving early and don't want to eat early, they can eat at school. So it's a poverty of time and a poverty of pocket. So I think we've seen this work for many, many, many years, decades, in fact, as that. So right out of the gate, we lost about $1.5 million in charitable funding last year from the President's Choice Children's Foundation funding. They had been generously supporting many of our schools in York Region for the last 6 years, but then kind of abruptly cut back about 80% of that funding. So the loss to schools from last spring till now has been a huge challenge for schools. And we have many schools that are very high need schools that, can't fundraise on their own because they can't necessarily raise money in among their parent group or in their neighborhood, the same as some other schools. So we have schools that are absolutely without a program right now, and people are shocked because those are the schools that have the highest food insecurity amongst families and students. So off the top, I think that 1.5, if there's another corporate sponsor who wants to step in, that would be amazing. But beyond that, just really also people understanding this isn't a fully funded government program. And I think more people we talk to, we realize that is the assumption that the school boards, that help public health, that the government is paying somehow to make this program go. It's a very small contribution from the government level. So when people understand that, I think it'll also help our cause.
Yeah, very good. Veronica, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think everything Yvonne said, absolutely. I would love to
Mhm.
see fully funded programs. And I think too, in addition to the sort of the poverty alleviation that people generally associate with it, I think it's important to remember too that it's more than that. It's about providing access to education, right? We know that um, students who are hungry, who have other things going on, have lower attendance rates in school. And what's been shown is that simply by having access to food at school, they are 3 times more likely to graduate high school. That their math scores are 5 times higher, and standardized science testing is 7 times higher. Um, but there's also sort of that social component to it as well, right? And one of the best quotes that I can think of is a high school in Richmond Hill who did sort of a survey about their student nutrition program. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that was given by a student was that they really liked the program because when their teachers give them something to eat every day, it makes them feel like somebody cares about them. And I think everything else that we do in trying to support students is going to be irrelevant if kids feel like they don't belong and we don't care and they're not well supported in every way possible. And if something as simple as a cheese string, an apple, and some crackers can make them feel like somebody is invested in them and their future and their success, then I think that it's something well worth doing.
Definitely. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's let's be a little more caring community and step up and do things. So, well, I am so glad you guys have taken the time to talk to me. But before we end, I do end all podcasts with the same question for all guests. I want you to name one thing you really like about this community. So, Yvonne, one thing you like about this community?
Yeah, for sure. I always like this question. So I worked in our schools in York, in Richmond Hill in particular, for about 12 years, and now I'm based out of Newmarket. But as we said, the program spans across the entire school region. So what I really like is that when people know there's a need, there's a great generosity of spirit and a generosity to help, whether that's volunteering or helping with donations and helping with funding in any way that you have the ability to do that. So I think really, as Veronica said, the challenge is a lot of people don't understand where this funding comes from and what the situation is that we're in, that schools have to actually fundraise actively for more than 90% of their funding. So I think once people know, I think people will want to help, and I think we'll see a real increase in partnerships and donations to the Food for Learning as a whole, so that then we can equally or equitably distribute that funding across the schools. We really need to help those that are in the deepest need right now.
Okay, thank you. Veronica, one thing you really like about this community, and I put really broad definition of community, so however you define community.
I think one of the things I love most is the amount of creativity that I've seen across, sort of the Richmond Hill area in particular, but also region wide, in the ways that people come up with to solve problems and the ways they can show support. And I think one of the great things about student nutrition in particular is that it really allows for that creativity. So it allows people to contribute in whatever way plays to their strength or they have the capacity, right? We're not asking people to, only fit into this narrow definition of, and so it really is a way for different segments of the community to come together in the way that best suits them. And I love to see all the different ways that that's happened across York Region.
Okay, I like both of you gave really good answers to that question, so thank you for that. But again, thank you, Veronica and Yvonne, for taking the time to do this podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. I would very much appreciate you sharing this podcast. Please tune in next week as we continue to explore the community. Consider emailing me at Marj, M-A-R-J, at marjandre.com. I welcome suggestions for podcast guests. Stay well, stay connected.